Hello and welcome to a new video. This video will be mainly about the pond, which I started digging more than 2 years ago. I always dreamed of living next to a body of water, so every time I needed some soil for the garden, I dug it up on this place in front of our cabin. The subsoil has been dug up for using as a building material on a couple of projects. At the end of last year, I started to raise the edges and really shape up the form of what would one day become a pond. It has been a slow grind. We had a little bit of experience of making a pond in the garden in Belgium where we lived before. There we could witness the attraction for all kinds of insects and frogs to come visit the water, which was such a pleasure to observe and something we hope to replicate here. A couple of weeks ago I finally finalized the last bits and pieces of the form, picking up all the little stones and covering it with an underlayer of blankets and tapestries. But first an update on the garden. The days are filled with warmth and sun, but the night times are cold. It also hasn't really rained in a long time. Everything has a late start this year, but at the end of May I thought it was about time to start planting some warm-loving plants, as the danger for frost seemed to have disappeared from the weather predictions, and I was getting really impatient for seeing some green in the garden. In early springtime we always make a few visits to the beach for collecting seaweed to use throughout the garden. There was some interesting patterns and textures to be found here. Jonas started on a climbing structure for grapes and other vines so they can give us some shadow in the summer at some point, because our house is really getting overheated in the sunny afternoons. Finally time to roll out the rubber liner, which has been waiting for this moment for 2 years. This pond will be part of a rainwater collection system that gathers the water off the roof of the house. The goal is to add more biodiversity, beauty, and perhaps use it as a backup in case something happens to our well or our pump. Milk quantity we're getting is slowly increasing, and soon I will have to make yogurt and some cheeses to handle the amount that is coming in daily. One day our cat catched a baby squirrel, and we intervened to see if we could save the poor animal. It was in shock and bleeding in its mouth, so we were not so positive it would make it. We decided to give it a try and feed it some fresh goat milk every day, a couple of times.
Die is zo kalm. Allee, die spartelt zo niks tegen of zo. Zie maar.
We brought a squirrel inside the house so it didn't get cold at night. After a few days it got much better, and at some point I released him back in the forest and he jumped away with a lot of energy. I'm feeding my leftover and spoiled milk to the tomatoes, as I love the calcium and minerals in it. I invested in 2 small cherry trees this springtime to add to the garden. It's hard to not spend a lot of money on new plants. The first batches of stones for the pond came from our land, but we realized just how many we would need to cover the whole area.
David Bales and Ted Orland's book, Art and Fear. Do you want to tell me what you've been doing with this? No, I don't want to tell you what I've been doing because...
One cold night we had covered all the little plants because of a 2 degrees Celsius weather forecast at the end of May. But sadly, in the morning time there was a lot of frost damage. It must have been at least -2 degrees. These events can be so discouraging, and that day I was mourning the death of many tomatoes, pumpkins and beans, and complaining to Jonas how unforgiving it can be to grow stuff in the north. We found a source for stones on the neighbor's field that was recently plowed. They were happy for us to gather them and pick them up, as they had trouble with getting the plow through the land. It felt good to finally do some detailing and finishing with this landscaping project. Here I'm adding a thick layer of wood chips on the pathway next to the pond. We have 2 little solar pumps from our previous pond that we're using again to circulate the water around. We will also need to add a filter area with reed and cattails to let the water flow through, so those plants can absorb the nutrients in the water. We have a few survivors in between the tomatoes, and I should probably harvest the seeds from those for next year. Work on the pond continues. The gathering of stones, washing them and placing them one by one, day after day. After a week of stones, we needed a little break and decided to take an evening out on a little camping trip to enjoy the sunset, where we gathered more stones for making a fireplace. Here I'm attempting to harvest some tomato shoots or leaves to see if they will grow some roots if I put them in water and create more plants in that manner. We discovered a lot of holes in the old rubber liner that needed fixing first. We wanted to see if it was a good idea to hang a shadow tarp here and needed to figure out how we could do that.
Kleding is ook kapot daar.
After Jonas fixed 11 small holes with some sort of a rubber glue, it was time to fill up the second half with stones as well.
Hey konijntjes.
Dragonflies have arrived at the pond, which is good, because we need some help with keeping the mosquito population in check here, and they are doing a great job with that. This pond will need quite some plants to make it more clear and to keep it filtered. We will attempt at covering at least 50% of the water surface with plants over time, but it will take some years before we get to that point, I think. First small harvests are coming in from the vegetable garden, some kale and radishes and salads. Maybe we will add some small edible fish in the future, once it is more established. But now we need first to figure out some sort of filter system with reed plants, planted in big buckets. The pond will be part of a rainwater catchment system connected to the gutters of the house, which we will use first to fill up 3,000-liter containers next to the house, of which the first is in place. This water can be used to irrigate a part of the garden. Life is arriving quickly in the pond, and the amount of mosquito larvae in the water is quite astonishing as well. I found myself stopping and sitting on the edge of the water for hours this past week, looking at the dragonflies and other life that is developing and listening to the sound of the water, praying that all those mosquito larvae I see in the water will be eaten by other things before they have a chance to fly out. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you back in the next one. Bye for now.